Hello, guys and gals, me Mutahar, and you know what? It's another day where Linux beats up Windows. Now, this is not my monthly Linux cope video. To be honest with you, I'm not coping anymore. I'm not crazy. It's just actually gotten a lot better. About 3-4 years ago, I made a video where I was talking about gaming virtual machines, and I was really using virtual machines to play a lot of my video games underneath Linux through Windows, right? So basically, I would have a Linux system, I would make a Windows virtual machine, and I would play basically every game underneath there. Now, the thing is, I don't really have to play with that anymore, and it's been actually quite a while since I've spun up that virtual machine at all. In fact, it was the other day when I was testing for this video that I actually used the virtual machine again, all right, just to play some video games and get some comparisons and whatnot. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't been following, apparently this is the year of Linux. I've been hearing this every single year since, I don't know, 2015. So, don't hold your breath or anything, okay? Microsoft Windows ain't going anywhere, all right? It's still around, all right? Much like a tumor, it's still there, all right? It's going to be a while before it gets cut out. But honestly, I don't even want Windows gone. I think Windows is pretty cool. If Windows Vista was the dominant path, if we lived in a universe where that operating system and that style and that ethos carried forward, bro, I probably wouldn't be a Linux gamer. But one of the interesting things that I was reading was that apparently in Denmark, they were going to move away from Microsoft, including Windows and the Office 365. So the entire ministry is actually looking at shifting to Linux, all right, and using things like LibreOffice as actual replacements, which again is pretty cool. Now, this is not new. Every country actually has its own version of Linux. For instance, my home country, India, has Boss Linux, okay? Bharat Operating Systems. Now, is it impressive? I don't know. I mean, it's just Linux with an India twist added to it. But I've also looked at Linux distributions from China, for instance, right? Chinese military operating systems like Kylin OS. I've also looked at things like Russia's Astra OS, which is their version of a military or Russian homegrown operating system. Because obviously you would not be shocked that many big countries around the world would probably not want to just have software running on their systems that come from a nation that they're not exactly on the best of terms with. And even if you are on good terms with, what's wrong with a little bit of independence, right? So of course, ladies and gentlemen, Linux has kind of been growing in a lot of places. In fact, even here in the North America, there's versions of Linux that are designed so that we can cut Microsoft out of our lives even more. For instance, did you know that the security enhanced Linux, the really secure version of it, is actually a collaboration between a company known as Red Hat and the National Security Agency? Yes, it's something that I use on my actual home box. And the reason why I feel comfortable is because Linux is open source, meaning that it's basically naked and for everyone to observe. You can audit the code whenever you want, and generally there's companies that do this. And the best part about Linux is instead of one company controlling it, you basically have every single company in the world basically adding in upgrades and fixing things up for everyone to enjoy. So all the efforts that Microsoft, that Valve, that every company puts into it, we all get a big juicy benefit out of. And that's, of course, the future. Now, of course, one of the things that I kind of saw, and I talked about this before, was that even when it comes to buying computers from companies like Lenovo, you probably have seen a few ThinkPads out in the world. You know that one laptop with the little red nipple as a mouse? Yeah, you know what they're doing? They're selling Linux with the actual system. So to show you the cost-saving analysis, let's say you're somebody buying this ThinkPad, okay? You're just buying this laptop all willy-nilly. Now, of course, what Lenovo recommends is just get Windows 11 Pro. You can even add $81 to the price. Now, if you decide to get Ubuntu Linux, okay, you can save $191 because you're not paying for a Windows license, and you can instead put that money towards maybe a better processor, which you're probably going to see more of the benefits out of. And even then, it will be around the same price, maybe a little cheaper than buying Windows. If you upgrade that processor and you get Linux Ubuntu, you might be able to notice that, hey, I could pay an extra $272 for a genuine version of Windows, or I can just pay to get double the RAM for $264. I mean, come on now, you can't make this shit up. And when it comes to my drive, I don't know, do I want to pay for a copy of Windows 11 Home? or should I just double my SSD to like 512 gigs? I mean, ladies and gentlemen, let's be completely honest here. You're probably gonna get the shit that matters, which is RAM, CPU, hard drives, maybe a better graphics solution, who fucking knows? But yes, now you're starting to see some companies passing on those savings to you. Now, for us gamers watching, obviously you might be like, Muda, I play video games, okay? Windows is very important for me. And I think slowly but surely, that is starting to die a little bit. You know, there was a video by Dave2D, I even talked about it, plenty of actual tech channels talked about this, but the performance gain that Linux is providing through things like SteamOS over basic Windows is not to be scoffed at. When you're dealing with these handheld gaming systems like the Steam Deck or the Legion Go, you actually notice that installing Linux onto this gives you better battery life, better frames. It's actually just a more usable experience. And, you know, I really think the Steam Deck has changed the way people play. Like, for me, I've been playing a lot of games on my Steam Deck since I bought it. In fact, one of the games I recently picked up was this game called Chef RPG. If you're ever a huge fan of things like Stardew Valley, go give this game a buy. Picked it up for 20 bucks. Probably put a shit pot full of hours into it. But you know what? That's the thing about devices like the Steam Deck. They've simplified gaming to the point where it doesn't matter what you use. Whether you're running a Windows binary on Windows itself or Linux, the actual, like, it doesn't really feel any different. So I wanted to kind of put it more to the test, and mind you, this is not a very granular test from me, but I wanted to run a couple games and see what the performance differences were. So for instance, in my testing, I ran games like Silent Hill 2. Now I think the Silent Hill 2 remake is great, but it definitely wasn't a great PC port. However, the performance difference between Linux and Windows actually seems to have come together pretty well. In some cases, I actually did see Linux running the game smoother. Now, there's a couple more technologies that are in this game, like ray tracing, like DLSS frame generation, that used to be exclusive to Windows. And now they run pretty seamlessly underneath Linux without me modifying anything to the system at all. They just work as if they were underneath Windows anyways. So even with all of these things enabled, I actually noticed that my experience underneath Linux was comparable, if not slightly better than Windows. Now, the interesting thing about this testing is that I'm running an RTX 4090, and if you ever know anything about NVIDIA and Linux, it's not perfect. In fact, if anything, it's far from it. There's actually a big performance loss we get being NVIDIA gamers underneath Linux, simply because the driver software isn't exactly up to snuff with Windows. Now, if you have an AMD graphics card, which, you know, I really do want to install into the system, you can actually get better or more accurate performance with that GPU, simply because the drivers are a lot better. But even with these penalties in place, I was gobsmacked to see that under just playing a video game, naked eye testing, the Linux experience was the same, if not slightly smoother, than playing the game underneath Windows. Now, the other game that I wanted to test was something like Star Wars Battlefront 2. Now, this is an older game, and it's a game without ray tracing or any of these modern new features, but it still looks absolutely amazing. Now, the reason I wanted to test this was to A, just see the performance, and generally speaking, I was gobsmacked to see that my Linux performance for the game was on par, if not slightly better, or more stable than the Windows version out there. And not only that, the game worked flawlessly with multiplayer too. Even though that it requires me to use EA's bullshit tiny launcher, it still works as if I was playing a Windows game outright. So yeah, ultimately speaking, it's a pretty good experience out of the box. You know, all it took me was to just go to Steam, download the game as I would on Windows, and Bob's your uncle, I'm playing a fucking game seamlessly on my Penguin box. Now, the last game I wanted to test was Mind's Eye. Now, this game is dog shit no matter what platform you play it on, man. I was playing this thing underneath Linux, and I was playing this thing underneath Windows, and I'm gonna be completely honest with you, the experience is absolutely ass-fuckingly painful, regardless of what platform you're on. It ain't Microsoft's fault, and it ain't Linux's fault. The game is just bad. Now, even with that said, the reason why I wanted to test Mind's Eye was not just because of a joke, but also because I actually did not get a single crash underneath Linux. However, I did end up getting crashes underneath Windows. Now, it's not to the fault of Windows. This game just has a problem with, I believe, a feature known as HGSS underneath Windows. Now, with this feature set enabled, maybe the game wasn't properly patched up to snuff for me. It was kind of giving me issues on Steam. But with these features enabled, I was actually getting some pretty consistent crashes underneath Windows 11. Now, I've noticed that a bunch of other streamers and content creators who were playing this game also got those similar crashes. And they were all using Windows. So it leads me to believe that Mind's Eye or something with the Unreal Engine is having issues with that feature set enabled underneath Windows. But because underneath Linux, it doesn't necessarily have maybe an equivalent, I'm not getting those same crashes. In fact, actually underneath Linux, I was able to enable all of the DLSS frame generation and all of the cool stuff to get me slightly better performance. And overall, if you wanted to play bullshit like Mind's Eye, well, it works a lot better underneath Linux than it does Windows. But that's not a glaring recommendation that you should ever pick this game up, it's just actually that bad. Now, one thing that I really noticed was a serious win underneath Linux lately was the support from Anticheat. Now, that doesn't mean that you can play every game. For instance, I am a Rainbow Six Siege X player now, and you know the sad part about it is I still need that computer because Ubisoft will still not enable the actual anti-cheat, okay? It's a simple fix for them. They can do it, and I really hope they will. Because in comparison, companies like Namco Bandai have absolutely enabled it for Elden Ring Night Rain. So I was able to play this brand new, super popular game underneath Linux, out of the box, day one. And it's actually pretty glorious. Not only was I able to play games like Elden Ring Night Rain, but I also started loading up other multiplayer games like Splitgate 2 that seemed to work pretty well. I also loaded up Halo Infinite, and you know, to my shock, it also works out of the box completely well, as if you know, you were just playing it on Windows. You know, it's crazy to think that we're playing an Xbox game just on Linux, even games with multiplayer without it actually crashing. Truly, everything really is an Xbox, I guess, at this point. But yeah, I was actually shocked, man. A lot of games, some of the big popular ones now, are actually coming with Linux support out of the box. And in some cases, if you're Marvel Rivals, for instance, they'll straight up tell you, yeah, we're putting in support for Linux. We actually are. Now, I think all of this is a super serious win on the Penguins' part, and it's only a matter of time before companies like Ubisoft or, you know, really any of these big multiplayer shooters start to really embrace Linux users, right? Like, I don't think it's too far off that Ubisoft might think, hey, we want to get some more players. Maybe it's fun to cater to the people with these Steam Decks or Rogue Allies or Legion Goes, or maybe just Linux gamers in general. Maybe we will just toggle that switch. And maybe down the road, maybe Grand Theft Auto Online might become enabled on Linux. But realistically, all this is just kind of hoping for the best, okay? Again, anti-cheat is still one of those tough things to go down, but it's good to see actual wins. So I want to celebrate it right here. I don't want to make a video that's just fucking negative about this point, okay? There are some wins. So you might as well just start focusing on all of that instead of the really negative parts, right? Even games like Dune Awakening were running pretty much out of the box. MMO games that are super duper popular, running completely out of the box on the Penguin. You can play with all of your friends. It doesn't even matter what system you're on. It's a good win to have, and you should be celebrating it. Now, for a lot of people, the big dreaded end of life is coming. So if you don't know, a lot of people are still on Windows 10, and Windows 10 is going through an end of life phase. In fact, we're getting pretty close to the actual end of, where Windows 10, Windows 8.1, and 7 will not be supported as soon as October of this year hits. So after October 14, 2025, you're not going to get free software updates from Windows Update or any of these things. What you'll have to do is pay Microsoft for end-of-life support. Now, unless you're somebody that really fucking has a boner for any of these versions of Windows, it makes no sense for you to just not upgrade to Windows 11. In fact, I'll be honest, the day Windows 11 dropped, I updated all my virtual machines and systems to it because, you know, it's better to just be on the newest shit and at least experience it, in my opinion, than consistently stick to the old and just wait until things slowly fizzle out. But not many people have that luxury. For instance, for those of you who don't know, the system requirements for Microsoft Windows 11 actually lock out a lot of people with older systems for really no good reason. Now, I believe as far as people who have like Intel, like 7th generation chips, so we're talking i7 7700 era like systems, anything before that doesn't seem like it's going to work underneath Windows 11. And the sad part about it is there's no real good reason why that doesn't work. You can still pick up some decent CPUs for pretty good prices, and if you're somebody that wants a really budget system to play older games on, which I'm sure a lot of you guys do, you can still pick these things up, build a computer, and thanks to the power of Linux, for instance, you can get things going really easily. You can actually bring life to older systems that are actually just slated to turn into fucking e-waste after October 14, 2025. In fact, one of the operating systems that I wanted to talk about was Bazzite Linux. Now, I have talked a lot about SteamOS, but honestly, I don't even really think you need to wait for SteamOS. If you want an experience that's already put together and better, just download Bazzite. It's so simple that you can install it, put it onto any of your systems, and it comes with easy wizards that will basically have things automated and set up right from the get-go. So for instance, if you're somebody that just wants to have RGB, you're somebody that wants to have streaming, you want to have like emulators set up on your system out of the box, Bazzite will basically just do it for you. In fact, it's shockingly easy to the point that I would say it's easier to install this than it is to install Windows. It's not only faster, but you can get things up and running faster than you would, even with a Windows system. It's kind of mind-boggling. And with a lot of popular applications like Discord and shit like that, pretty much working out of the box for Linux anyways, realistically, it's not too different from just using Windows, right? Like, it's crazy how impressive the system has gotten. One of the comments that I saw from like EndeavorOS's forums actually warmed my heart a little bit. Lord Simon here says, "Hey everybody, I recently built myself a new gaming PC, and with the way Microsoft is going with Windows, I was very reluctant to use it for a new build. Thanks to Mutahar, some ordinary gamers, I learned that running Linux as a primary OS for gaming is in fact very viable. Like many others, I've dabbled in the past with various flavors, but they found something called EndeavorOS. Now, I've never recommended EndeavorOS and I've never talked about it, but this person found a version of Linux that worked for them, they installed it, and they started their journey of complete computer independence. And that is just heartwarming to see, okay? It doesn't matter how many views these videos get. It doesn't matter if it's not a successful. It doesn't matter if it's like a hit or miss. When you read comments like this and you see people switching and enjoying themselves, that's all that really fucking matters at the end of the day, okay? When you can convert somebody, it almost feels like this little cult that we have is becoming a little more livelier. Now, when it comes to a lot of those older Windows 11 systems, even when it comes to the OEM, Microsoft is trimming even more support from their compatibility list, which again is never a good sign. There's a lot of older systems that can still be used for good budget systems that Microsoft is just leaving on the cutting room table. Now, a lot of the guys over at Linux have basically been creating new pages to help you guys convert. Now, the guys, KDE, okay, these people make one of the best user interfaces for Linux, the best environments, made a page, KDE for Windows 10 Exile. Upgrade your software, not your computer, which is true as hell. So you got this poor guy sitting over here on a road with his little MacBook and his noodles. It's a very depressing image. Your computer is toast. So after October 14th, they want to turn it into junk, which is pretty true. So effectively, what you can do is upgrade the absolute smart way. Upgrade to KDE's Plasma Desktop and a version of compatible Linux. And they're true, even machines that are 10, 15 years old can happily run Plasma, a modern, safe operating system that won't let you down. And that is actually quite true. If you have a super old system that just is chugging to run Microsoft Windows, like the crap top that I started this YouTube channel on, you could absolutely install versions of Linux and bring old life into beautiful systems. And again, there's no reason for you to throw away stuff that actually still works. A lot of old computers can still play some pretty decent games. They can still run some pretty cool servers. They can still do some pretty awesome shit. You just browse the web, old laptops can absolutely still keep up with the modern internet of today. And if you're somebody that loves Windows so much that you want to make your system look like 7, XP, Vista, there's a lot of configuration tutorials out there that'll teach you how to make sure your Linux system looks just like old school Windows. In fact, I used to actually make my system look like Windows 98 for the longest time, just because if somebody came over, they're like, bro, what is this super old shit that I see on your system? And how are you able to run a modern game on it? Well, it's just because I can. It's just because I have the ability to do so. So yeah, Linux is kind of kicking Microsoft's ass a little bit, and a lot of it really comes with the absolute benefit of having all of the world support behind it. And I really think that, all of these things, all of these tiny little stabs that are going, right? Whether it be handheld gaming PCs, whether it be government switching over, whether it just is that people who are watching my channel even, or any channel, I've started to see the comments for it. People are saying, I can't even upgrade to Windows 11. Instead of buying new expensive hardware that you may not need, you can just switch over to the Linux side and still use your computer for a few more years, or maybe several more years, until you actually really have to start upgrading. But yeah, it's kind of great to actually have some real level of tech independence. And, honestly, if you're somebody that complains about Windows and still consistently uses it because you think you have to, this is not like anything else. This is actually hilarious because an alternative does exist, and it has existed for years. And in 2025, it's gotten to a point where it's pretty much 1-to-1. So really, you can make the choice. You can keep using Windows, or if you want to give it a try, you can use Linux. You can even dual boot it and kind of experience both side by side and see which one you really truly like. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike it if you dislike it. I am out.